Hello there, Sir from 17 once again. This is my Evilwest, Evil Difficulty No Healing walkthrough. This is Chapter 10, it's called Bats in the Belfry, and we are once again in the interval between, where we come back to the Rentier Institute and we wander around looking for gold, or books as the game likes to call it. I want to talk about something that might end up being a problem at some point in this series. It hasn't been so far, but that might just because it's in obscurity. And that is the idea of no healing, because watching the videos, you've probably seen me heal. And you might have been wondering, hang on a second, what's going on here? And it never even occurred to me that it could be misconstrued, but then you realise, don't you, that the internet is the birthplace of missing the point. I love this level, by the way. I think it has by far one of the best aesthetics. And I really enjoy that it's in an area that looks super westerny, as opposed to a more remote place, or some kind of swamp. And it introduces new enemies too, which we're going to be talking about. But of course, the no healing restriction in this playthrough, or this walkthrough, is the healing feature, which is right on your D-pad if you're playing on controller. I don't even know what it is on PC because I unbound it. But it is, of course, the healing feature that has the cooldown. I will be healing in other ways when I execute people, when they drop orbs and whatnot. That's kind of just how the game works. I'm not going to avoid picking up an orb by accident, you know, and then restarting, because that would just be frustrating. Although you can wear something that changes the health drops into energy, which is way better in my opinion. But fundamentally, if you're watching this and you've wondered, hang on a second, you just healed then something happened and you healed. That is going to happen, and it's not against the rules of what I set out to do. I just never really specified that when I said no healing, it was going to be using the tool that Jesse has. So, for the more pedantic people out there that like the fastidious information, I hope that explains a little bit of something you might have been confused about. And now we have an engagement here against the upgraded familiar. So this monster, this dude in the hat that looks really, really cool and is one of my favourite enemies in the game, he is essentially the upgrade of the standard human who can shoot you and whack you. And he runs away a little bit, he has this interesting teleport, and he has the ability to throw dynamite. But the thing that you're going to really notice, which makes him very problematic, is that he has the capacity to shoot you very quickly. And of course you might notice, I'm not doing this fight no damage. It's not because it can't be done, it absolutely can, but it's a very long fight and I was getting very annoyed at it, so I kind of went full berserker mode. And you're seeing some fantastic hitboxes that Evilwest is willing to give us right now. This might be one of the sloppiest fights in the project. It is an interesting thing, isn't it, psychological damage? I love the flamethrower, dude. It is so strong when you use it in the right way. You can do a lot of damage with this tool. And a lot of people aren't using it, which is interesting as well. But we've also got the upgraded version of the Butchermen, which is these fellows here. And you can't pull these guys. That's how upgraded they are. And it tells you that they mean business. Handily, if you've been playing the game a decent amount of time, you won't be relying on the pull at all, because it's one of those things where it's definitely a crutch early on. And if you don't use it, you will be a better player. And then when you start using it, you will be a very good player. And it's what I recommend everybody do, personally. If you avoid something that is incredibly strong, and then you get the fundamentals needed to navigate without it, when you go back to using it, you are going to become a destroyer of worlds. It's just the way it works. It always has, it always will. And then this phase is us taking on our buddy over here, which is the higher vampire lord, one of the creatures that appears most in the game. And what I'm going to do here, folks, is there's an interesting manipulation you can do to this guy where if you keep at a distance from him, he will either try and heal or he will either try to jump at you. And if he heals, when you interrupt him, he tends to drop energy, and you can use this to farm energy to get your super back and then just absolutely delete him. And it's very effective. It's very slow, it's not the most interesting thing to watch, but there are multiple phases of spawns here, and sometimes you will get pinned into walls if you're not careful. So I need one more battery now, and I'll be able to activate it again, and the battery's to my right, but I'm not paying the attention I should be paying, and I'm now one hit away from death. Which just goes to show how generous this difficulty is when you believe, you know, it could have been way worse. And then we get him, we get the battery, and then we turn around and it's just this fellow, and all we have to do is put him down. But this is a tough fight when you first get here. Looking at it now, it's nowhere near as bad as it feels when you first do it. And if I were to re-record it, I could definitely do this a hell of a lot cleaner. But this is not about making the cleanest walkthrough in the world. This is about helping people that might not know Evilwest as well as I do at the moment. And hopefully that's what it does. But there goes the first encounter of the Belfry level. And now we're going to be moving on to some kind of wandering encounters, and then there's a couple of tough ones coming up as well. There's also a boss on this level, I believe. I think this is the level with the Brooks. And that level is... I don't like that boss, guys. I don't like it too much at all. You know my feelings on the bosses so far. I've been quite vocal saying that they're just not very well designed in my opinion. And it stems from all the systems that the game does well, and then the bosses seem to turn them off. And I don't understand why you would come up with all these systems and all these wonderful ways to engage with your systems, and then merely deactivate the ones that were cool. But we'll have plenty of time to talk about it, because it's a lengthy battle. But over here we've got a couple of the standard enemies. If you set them on fire, when you have an upgrade later on, guys, when they die, they'll explode. And you can use that to do some real damage on some people. And when you combine it with the cannonball exploding when it hits targets, you can do so many interesting combinations that you might not have thought of. And it really does work when it comes to crowd control. I'd really like it if you could kick those little leeches away. That'd be a nice animation, wouldn't it, where you press like B when they get near to you and Jesse does a good old soccer kick, like we're in Pride, just belts it away. But this is one of the areas that opens up a little bit more than some of the others. The level after this is one of the most open levels in the game because you can kind of approach it in any way that you want. And it makes me wonder, all the people that are criticising how linear the game is, if they enjoyed A Man of the People. Because it does make me wonder. Because if your criticism is that there's no choice and you're constantly being force-fed your path and there's no way to miss anything, even though I've missed upgrades, I miss upgrades in this actual walkthrough, so this notion that you can't miss anything because it's so obvious, it's not true, you know? I was looking for upgrades, I was looking for things, and I ended up missing a few. It's gonna happen. It's just people get so hyperbolic with something when they're not enjoying it that they kind of just bang on it for the sake of banging on it and destroying it. And I don't mind if you do that and you're funny, or you at least do it in an eloquent manner, where you can kind of put the words together in a way which might make somebody have a better day or a more fun time with the video, because that's kind of my brand. You know, I love shitting on a good game. I love shitting on a bad game. I like shitting on good games more than bad games, because it's the good games that could have been great, whereas bad games will always be bad games. But I like to do it in a fashion that hopefully makes it fun to listen to if you do this in almost like a podcast form. But a lot of the videos that I saw reviewing this were just bad reviews. And I just don't really understand it. How do you feel about reviews, guys, when it comes to reviewing something? Is there something that you like to see on a review? Is there a standard you like to see adhered to? Because I thought I was quite relaxed when it came to reviews, but I definitely have a low tolerance for people saying things in reviews that are literally not even true. But the problem with that statement is that because video games are so subjective, they'll watch any review and think that something's wrong, you know? Like, you can't really get around that thinking when people... Especially if it comes from a sense of defense, if it comes from a sense of really, really loving something. Because people do get very apologetic-y, which is not a word, but the mental gymnastics to justify it is definitely a sport. And they play it well. But we just got a really good move there, which you absolutely want to buy. It is the cannonball turning into an explosive when you hit people. And some of the encounters coming up are so close-quartered and so dense that this is the move you want to be using. And I don't know if I'm going to buy it just yet, because I'm very reticent to buy upgrades in this game at times, because a lot of the times when I do it, I have to respec because I don't like what they do. And it's quite a funny situation to be in, this idea that they give you these points to enrich your experience and to make Jesse more capable, but then you avoid them because the thing that they do throws you off on a player level. Which is why, even when I have all the upgrade points and all the money in the world, I'm not going to have all the upgrades. Because there are things that I just do not like. And it's stuff like that that makes me wish that the skill tree was a bit more developed. Because I'd love to have a build that's completely different to your build and completely different to their build and so on and so forth. But they didn't give it that kind of breadth. They didn't look at it from that perspective, it seems. And unless you're going to do some kind of super restricted run where you can only upgrade like 3 things, you're really not going to see too much build diversity. What you will see is playstyle diversity, but because the Zapper's so strong, I'm going to make a prediction here that the diversity is going to be Superman punches, Zappers into E-combos, because that's kind of the lowest common denominator. It's the playstyle everybody finds, and it's the playstyle that the creatively devoid will just linger on, and then critique the game saying that it doesn't have much going for it when you're the one who didn't use the tools. That was interesting as well. You've got to be really careful with this enemy when it comes to uppercutting it, because it naturally releases explosives which damage you on touch. So if you contact them, you'll take hits. I do not recommend styling on those leech monsters. I recommend styling on everything else if you want to. Although sometimes you might not have the tools that you want to. Like the pistol juggle is really handy for doing more intricate juggles if you want to get into that kind of stuff. And I'm sure somebody's going to come up with a combo video, because people made combat videos in that... Combo videos, sorry, in that new Sonic game, Sonic Frontier. But I like this burning place. I do like burning levels in my video game. I don't like them as much as I would have liked a nice train level. I'm going to keep lamenting that train level for the people that have been listening, because it is kind of unfortunate. And then when we climb up here, we have a very claustrophobic fight coming up. But I don't think it's in this room, right? I think this room is just a debated room with gold in it and a couple of barrels. I do wish this game had more interactions in its world. I like that you can shoot the barrels, and you'll notice I like shooting the barrels because I always engage with destructibles if I can. But for me, they should have dropped coins. It didn't have to be lots. It could have been 1 or 2, 3, 4, 5, you know, depending. It should have been a way to build gold. Shooting things for the sake of just breaking them comes from my lust of liking to break things in video games. But here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Quite claustrophobic, lots of opportunities to clip on gravestones. You have 3 shield guys in a room completely overrun and riven with the standard enemy types. And again, if you have the capacity here, guys, to use Cannonball to explode, it's your best friend in this room. Not only will you get iframes on the launch if you do it at the right timing, but you're going to get so much splash damage here. And it's the whole game is about managing crowds like this. Learning to do crowd control is one of the most important skills, and movement is your greatest crowd control. A lot of people don't seem to realise how important movement can be in a game like this, so I definitely recommend experimenting with it, especially when it comes to putting yourself in a position of power at all times. Like, some people do this thing where they get so tunneled vision that they just kind of back up into a wall and get overwhelmed. And if you're at that point where you're backing up and you know there's a wall there, why are you doing it? I always used to wonder that, and I've done it myself, you know, until you start realising that the only way to win here is not to go back, it's to go forward. And in a game such as this, there's so many ways to go forward. You can even teleport forward, you know. There might be one enemy that's off to the side. Zap towards him, boom, you've fixed your situation. You'll notice I don't use that zap forward too much outside of like closing distance for executions. It's not because it's not good, guys, it's really good. It's because I want to put myself in a position where I have to play better. Because if I put myself in a space where I have to be better, I will be better. Speaking of being better, this poor guy decided to get stuck in the old endless running animation when he runs into an area that doesn't have... I'm assuming the gate doesn't have conventional collision, because he didn't bump into it and stop. Instead, he just ran indefinitely, and it looked really silly. And if you leave him, he'll do that forever. But you'll be here forever, because you've got to kill him. Another thing you won't see me doing, guys, is when I build up the stun bar, you won't see me using electricity to stun the monsters all that much. It's something that you'll start to do as you get better at the game, and it can be really nice for waiting for something you don't like and interrupting it. But what I noticed is I wanted to use it as a trump card to stop a move I couldn't dodge or that I disagreed with. And then the detection on it would either be sluggish or slow, or it would miss and not detect, and I would get hit. So you're going to see me using that manipulation on the final boss, and you might see me using it in a couple of other fights, but for the most, I don't use it. And it's not that it's not good, guys, it's that it bit me a few times, and I became very wary of its failings. And if you've ever done that, where you come up against something that you know is good, but you see the downsides of it, and you see the double-sided sword, you've got to be careful. And I came into this project with the impression that I was going to do a pretty clean run, and I've tried to do a clean run, and losing a run to a mechanic not proccing correctly is one of the worst feelings you can get. And I don't know what I've talked about in this guide, because I've been recording it over a period of time, because it's kind of been very helter-skelter at the moment with all the projects that are happening. I've been busier than I've been in a while, which is really nice, because I do like being busy. But between this and Metal Gear Rising and all the new releases, it's definitely diverted my attention, shall I say. And because I've been talking about this game a lot on my stream, I'm not entirely certain what I've shared on the videos and what I've shared on the stream, so if I repeat myself, I do apologise to the eagle-eyed viewer who pays attention, because it can be a bit frustrating, but it's just because it's all just this tornado of engagement. But I've talked a lot about the batteries, and I've talked a lot about the zap and how it's way too strong. And I came up with a couple of ways that I think would make it a lot better. There's a big fight coming up in this room though, so I want to talk about this once I've finished looking around to make sure I've got all the treasure and irritating that one guy that doesn't like my mouse movements. So, elite dude with stick, standard vampire dudes that have no skin, and I think later on it spawns one of those new creatures we fought, which is the dude with the Ghostbusters laser that's got all the tentacles. It looks like something from Alien Storm, if you're old enough to remember that classic. Oh, I love this as well. Did you see that? That's my favourite move in the game. Uppercutting vampires when they jump attack is my favourite thing in this game because it feels like God Hand. I wish there was more opportunities of that, and maybe there is and I haven't found them, so I look forward to discovering them. But this is me using the cannonball with the explosive. Look how good it is. It is so good. And here comes the creature that drops the skulls. So, the shotgun. The crossbow is so good against this monster. Like, it's better to stun him with a crippling rod before you do your special there to guarantee that it has a really, really long stun. You can also hit him a ton with the flamethrower to proc a bunch of damage and to make sure that he stays in place. I'm curious how good the dynamite and the Gatling gun are against this monster. I would imagine they're pretty good. But I like this fight because it pits you against these priest guys, these familiar men, and it pits you against him too. And this is two new enemies coming together. And I don't know about you, but at this point I was getting a bit sick of seeing that higher vampire lord because he turns up way too much. And I don't know why they didn't make any different versions of him. They needed to have at least 2 or 3 versions of that creature for how much it turns up. And I think people would have a lot better time with the game if they did that, because it just feels like they throw that dude at you in every fight. And then people say things like the game has no enemies, when the game does. The game's got like 30 enemies. It's just they like to use similar ones. And a lot of the time it works. But do you know the thing that I think leads to people not seeing this in the way that they see Doom Eternal? Is that when Doom Eternal spawns a Baron, or it spawns a Mancubus, you can kill it in 5 seconds. And then 5 seconds later, all the things you used to kill it have come back. But in this game, it's not like that. In this game, you can kill these big enemies in like 10 seconds if you hit them with everything. But then you have to wait on these cooldowns that make it feel like you've used all the best stuff you've got, and if anything else turns up, you're in a bit of trouble. And I think that's the reason why people can see Doom Eternal, see all these big monsters spawning, but then think, it's not a problem because I can take them out very swiftly and very effectively. Whereas in this game, you can't do that. Your shotgun is the only weapon that gets an advanced cooldown outside of healing. And some of the cooldowns are just too long. Like, when you throw the dynamite, you can be killing everybody in the room and absolutely kicking ass. That dynamite's not coming back in that fight. It's just not. You know, it's the same with the crippling rod. Like, when you use the crippling rod, it's absurdly strong. I think it's too strong. I'd nerf it personally. But you're not going to get it back unless it's a really long fight, because it's on this timer that says, you've used a powerful tool, now you don't get to use it. And I think that this is a bit of an oversight, this, for the devs, because I think that playing well and doing cool things should reward you. And I think they could have made it tied to maybe parrying or something. Like, make the parrying tighter and more difficult to do, so you have to do it as it impacts rather than like holding the button and getting it for free. Have it so that the parry is a bit tighter. I'm not asking for fucking Royal Guard from DevilNeverCry 3. I'm not asking for perfection. I'm asking for tighter, a bit more difficult. And then, when you parry, have it affect your cooldowns. Have your cooldowns come down by like 10%, so you land a bunch of parries, you get your shit back. Like, you could work it in like that. You know, every time you use like an environment, cannonball somebody into an environment or cannonball somebody into another enemy, you get a little bit back, you know. Make it so that the higher skill ceiling techniques give you more back and the easier stuff gives you, you know, less. Because I think that that would be the way to make it, to separate a good player from a great player. Like, you can kick ass in this game and you can control people by shutting them down with zapping and uppercutting them and E-combos, right? However, you shouldn't get any of your cooldowns back. Your cooldowns should be slowed down, if anything, because you're using basic bitch shit. But if you start doing intricate things like juggling, if you start swapping between weapons and hitting an enemy with like 3 different damage types, this is when it should start rewarding you and saying, this player knows what he's doing, this player's engaging with the game, this player should be able to use the tools more. And I know that might sound ironic, because that player doesn't need those tools to win and survive. A weaker player needs those tools because they're not good enough to survive. But that's not how we should focus our games. We shouldn't focus our games around constantly spoon-feeding a low ability player. We should be rewarding low ability players for getting better. And when they start getting better, we should start making it more powerful, more impactful. And then it'll encourage them to continue to perform and continue to evolve, instead of everybody spamming the same thing, which is, you know, what this game's going to devolve into for a lot of people. But the crux of it is the battery system. I think the battery system's really interesting, but there's almost no real way to spend it. And there's no real cost of a lot of what you do, and I don't agree with that at all. And I would really like for them to look into this in whatever they do next, because I would like the idea of, I've said this before, but I'll say it again, of a meter burn system, or some kind of EX system. It'd be really nice if there was a button you could press that modified moves and gave you special versions of them. Because think about the toolset in this game. The toolset in this game is just small enough so that you've got a decent amount of stuff to play with and to think with, but it's not too big that you get completely overwhelmed. Like, some players will get overwhelmed because they're used to doing one thing at all times and that's it. But fundamentally, compared to like Doom Eternal, this is not the most complicated game with things that you can combine. Imagine if each of those tools had some kind of modified version of it, and you spent a battery to do it. And depending on how powerful that feature was, depends on how many batteries it drains. And then this ballet of requiring batteries and earning batteries would feel a lot more important. Because as it stands, there are a couple of moves that you can spend batteries on, things like Quake, things like your Super, things like the better version of the Ground Slam, the better version of the launch into Ground Slam. Like, there are a couple of draws that will use batteries, but fundamentally, they're a resource that you will often see being neglected because there's no real way to spend it. And if you look at me right now, guys, I don't have Quake, so you won't see that. I don't have those moves because I don't have enough skill points to get some of those bigger moves that let you spend batteries. The only thing I can spend my batteries on right now is using my Super. And because I'm fighting a bunch of standard enemies, I'm not going to use it. You know? There's no reason to. So I'm sitting on a resource like a Mega Elixir in a JRPG, and I'm never using it, so what's the point of it? And this is the type of stuff I want the devs to think about, if they make any more, because this is where you get true complexity, true depth, by giving a player the choice to do things a different way. And I've been playing Miles Morales recently, the new Spider-Man game. I say new, it's not that new for anyone that's got a PS5. And in that game they added these Venom moves that have nothing to do with the symbiote, which is very odd in its naming convention, but there it is. And it gives you these modifiers. It's essentially a modifier. Because you get a move on A, you get a move on X, you get a move on Y, you get a move where you press 2 buttons together. And it's the equivalent of the takedowns that you got in the original game, but now you've got this special move. And it just multiplies how you can apply your combat. And I don't think that the game is very good, personally. I don't really like it. It feels like bad DLC. But I think that that's really good, because it enables somebody who plays that game for combat to have an entire new toolkit to play with. And not only do I have a toolkit, but I can then incorporate it into my existing toolkit, and then layers upon layers reveal themselves. And that's the fun of a good combat system. It's not necessarily the amount of tools, it's in the ways that you can engage with them. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people are going to miss with Evilwest. They're going to miss the fact that timing is a very important part of this game. There's a temporal aspect, you know, to everything you do in it. Because depending on your timing, depends on the result. You can kick people in this game, and I think it does a bit of minuscule damage, and sometimes it can flinch them, but fundamentally it's designed to interrupt. It's designed to be like a guard break or a flinch. And the shotgun does the same thing in many respects if you do it at the right time. You even get rewarded with the shotgun with double damage. Very, very useful. The flamethrower does the same thing. The Gatling gun does the same thing. These tools can be used to achieve the same result, but that does not make them the same, because that's only one of the many features that they can do. And now we have the Brooks, or the Brutch, I don't know how you say this name. This boss is not fun, but I've got some interesting setups on it, and I'm going to hopefully get you through it as quick as possible, so that you don't have to suffer for too long. My opening play there is the same every time. That movement that I did, guys, I do all the time. The biggest fear of this fight is when your gun desyncs. If you get that desync from your reticle, that can happen, you'll be shooting at these weak points and you'll never hit them, no matter how accurate you are, no matter where you are, no matter what you use. And it only happens rarely, but when it does happen, just restart. There's no reason to suffer. This fight's too long because you don't do any damage to this boss. And this boss is so broken and boring and lame, like... They need to change these boss fights, dude. They're bad. But the monster to my left here is a leech clone, and if you set it on fire, it will dance around, and you can kill them if you want to, but I found it completely pointless to kill them, so instead, I like to just ignore them and focus on the boss. Just be careful of the boss's attack. It comes out so quickly. It's really, really annoying too. As soon as the boss moves, it's an attack, so press block on then. Don't wait for it to hit you, because if you see it move and you don't do anything, it's going to hit you. It's one of the fastest attacks in the game. But as long as you shut down the weak points, and as long as you're getting the batteries back, that's all you really need to worry about. What we want to do here is we want to constantly be in a position of spending our super and getting batteries back for breaking weak points. And then when the enemy spawn turns up, we're going to try and kill as many of these enemies either in the air, while they're electrocuted, or with executions if you have that ability. That's what you want to do here. But bear in mind, right now, the boss is going to fire the big orb at you. And you can tell, you know, the reason I'm running away from it is because I was having problems with my gun desyncing some of the attempts, and I didn't really trust to shoot it sometimes. So I just kited instead. But we're doing this to hopefully get batteries back. And there it is, try and stop it. As soon as your first barrage starts missing, that's when you want to kite. That's when you know that the game's been a bit fucky. But I'm going to weaken as many as I can, and then I'm going to try and either knock them into each other, shotgun them in midair. Right, here we go. Going to hit him again with some guns, going to launch him again, and this should be a battery, this. I didn't play that very well there, guys. I didn't get as many batteries back as I should have. But it's not the end of the world. This is not a difficult fight. It's just really boring and really long. And you might be wondering, you know, Chris, it doesn't seem too long. It's only 2 minutes. But that's 2 minutes when you completely optimize your damage. You know, I'm using every tool I've got, I'm optimizing like a motherfucker, and I've got a lot of experience in this fight. I should be able to kill this boss in 30 seconds. It shouldn't be fucking 4 minutes when I know exactly what I'm doing. Like, I don't watch the bar when I attack, by the way. You know when it barely goes down, you barely even see the white until you do this? This is the best move in the game against this boss, it seems. Like, I don't want to see a boss bar going down so low. Like, I want to see big chunks, I want to see me being effective. I want Ninja Gaiden. Give me Ninja Gaiden damage. Make it fucking hard. Don't make it lame. And I'm going to use the crippling rod here to completely skip the shmup phase. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. And I can pull the boss now if I want to, because I've got the stun bar built up. And this is where it does the enemy phase. So again, we're going to try and kill these enemies in midair if we can. We're going to try and get the bonus, because I want to get my shit back if I can. That would be really nice. And then as soon as the boss comes back down, you should be able to kill it and finish the fight. Finish the fight like Master Chief. This is dangerous. You never want to be running towards that enemy. That enemy is a proximity alert. And it hurts you, which makes it even worse. But this is one of those encounters, when you first do it, you're going to get really frustrated because it feels like it's a very tall order. But compared to some of the fights later on, this really isn't too bad. I mean, don't get me wrong, if you're suffering, it's bad, guys. Trust me, it's fucking miserable. I've been here for an hour or two. I've been trying to find all kinds of strategies and all kinds of exploitations, and I'm still not happy with this fight. I wanted to get it even cleaner and figure out what I can do with it. And this is kind of interesting, this. I like the idea of this phase. I could just stun the boss, by the way, if I warped towards it, could knock it down. But the last time I did this, I actually took damage from something and died. So that's the reason why I'm not going to be too eager to do that. But if I zap the boss now, the boss will be stunned. And I do have my special ability as well. I don't really know why I'm giving the boss this much credence. Just kill it. I guess I'm just keeping you on the edge of your seat or something. Shooting it with a crossbow, shooting it with all the guns. Should be dead now if I go up close. Here we go, dead boss. But yeah. How did you find this fight, guys? Did you like it? I would delete it. I don't think it adds anything. But that's the end of this mission. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching, and you take care now.